connecting on a personal level. Having been a playwright, what works in the theater is the same, I think, in what works in making sales social. When you find something that's extremely singular and personal, that becomes universal. In talking to prospects, whether they're in a consult with me or I'm just making a LinkedIn reel, I'm trying to address the specific. I imagine who I'm talking to and what their issue is.
Welcome to the Making Sales Social podcast, featuring the top voices in sales, marketing, and business. Join Bryn Tillman and me, Bob Woods, as we each bring you the best tips and strategies our guests are teaching their clients, so you can leverage them for your own virtual and social selling. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Making Sales Social. We're excited you're here because I have such a fabulous guest. Rahti Gorfien is the founder of Creative Calling Coaching. She works with creatives to be successful entrepreneurs that want to take their artistic ability, but they need guidance. People with a little bit of ADD or, they're all a little bit all over the place, but they really want to hone in and make a living doing what they love the most. Welcome to the show, Rahti. I'm excited that you're here.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here, she said as a frog jumped into her throat, but fantastic.
Awesome. Did I miss anything in talking?
You nailed it. You nailed it. I mean, thank you.
Awesome. Well, so, I'm just thrilled to have you on today. We just newly met, but I think we connected right away. And I was so excited to learn from you. And I'm excited for you to share some of your genius with our listeners. But before we get into that, we ask all of our guests one question, which is, what does making sales social mean to you?
What does making sales social mean to me? I think it means connection. I'm probably not the first to say that, but connecting on a personal level, and actually, having been a playwright, what works in the theater is the same, I think, in what works in making sales social. When you find something that's extremely singular and personal, that becomes universal. So in talking to prospects, whether they're in a consult with me or I'm just making a LinkedIn reel, I'm trying to address the specific. I imagine who I'm talking to and what their issue is. That's what I'm trying to address. So for me, that's what making sales social.
I love that. I absolutely do that. Personalization is so important. Yeah. And when you have your ideal person in mind, especially if it's video, you talked about reels, especially if it's video, they're connecting with you. It's funny because you might put that content out there one time, but you have 30, 40, 50 people that really connect with it. They feel like they know you. And so it's like literally, it's social at scale. So yes. I think that's awesome. I love that. So when we talked the other day, we talked about how hard it is for creatives, artists, that are their creative is isolated. It's in their basement, in their homes. They haven't really been able to monetize it. And that's where you come in and help them. So talk to me about the journey from, I am really good at what I do, but I don't know how to make money doing it, to now I'm an entrepreneur doing what I love.
That's a lovely question. And first, though, I want to speak to something you said about creative being isolated. That I don't believe that's true. I don't agree with that. I have a differing opinion around that. First of all, things like acting is a social art.
Yes, that's true.
It is totally you are totally non-isolated. If you're going to get out there and connect, and you got to get to know casting directors and all of that. But certainly the creative process, if you are like a visual artist or even a composer, whatever, a writer of any kind, that can be isolating, I think. But when it comes to what you're talking about, taking it from being a hobby to a profession, isolation has no place.
Yeah. So how do you make that shift?
Right. Great question again. How do you make that shift? Sorry to be repeating. I'm a verbal processor. That's one thing I do with my clients. I find out what makes them tick. Some of them need to think out loud, and I'm among that number. I'm a verbal processor. So if I repeat a question, that's why.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way, actually.
Yeah. So first, I help them get clear about where they are now, right?
Okay.
They may be much further along, perhaps, in their journey of becoming a pro than they realize. So, for instance, I worked with a young musician who was very accomplished, and she was doing concerts, she was out there, and all she needed to do was systematize her marketing so that she was doing the same thing every week, and continually reaching out on social media every week, having a newsletter and building that list and sending that out every week. Just the thing is, there's redundancy that can be unappealing to creatives in marketing.
Oh. Yeah, I get that.
Right?
Yeah.
And we all know that eventually you get the support of a team in helping you. And I also coach people to get to that point so they don't think they're doing it all alone, because you're making the art. That's the one thing nobody else can do.
Right.
So she's doing extremely well now, having upped her visibility. Then there are people who think they are much closer to turning their art into a business than they are. And, for instance, they've never written for television and they want to get on the staff of SNL.
That was my dream.
Really?
It was. Yeah. No joke.
Well, it's a lovely dream. And it's like climbing Everest.
Right.
It's not impossible, but, you have to understand that there's an incline for a goal like that. And it's steep. So folks like that, I have to be very careful. I don't want to discourage. It's not my business to pop anyone's dream, pop their bubble. However, I'm not doing a service to them if I'm not real and saying, well, let's just start out with getting some work on its feet, getting some work written and on its feet.
Tested.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
And then from there, we can get into community building, networking. Maybe there's probably a lower bar than SNL to initially, you might end up doing a web series. Really, that's so the journey is very individual. It's a very individual.
That's awesome. So I used to rewrite the skits to be funnier. That's what I always wanted to go in there. Like after I watched it,
you wanted to be the doctor.
I know. I just was like, oh, they missed it by an inch, because often they do. Oh, yes. Anyway, so once we had, a big piece of this is building a path. Now, a lot of creatives want to work their way out of a job, right? Like they're making a living in a pretty boring, not motivating way, but they got to eat. So what are the steps that they have to take? Obviously, first we have to figure out couple things come to my mind, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
They have to be really good to make it. You just really have to be good. You have to love it, right? Like you have to love what you're doing, and someone has to be willing to pay you for it. Right? So how do you know if all of those things come together?
Well, first of all, I think there is a mythology in the culture around making it. That is such an individual, what does that mean? Right? Does it mean being a household name? If it does, I can't, very few people are going to cross that threshold. I mean, it's all, nothing's impossible. However, I think it's the wrong point of focus.
So where do they start? I want to start.
First, I think they take pressure off making a living at their art, ironically. They take the pressure off of their art. Now, of course, it depends where they are in their career. But in many cases, creatives fail to see their day job, as it were, as the patron of their art. If you are suffering financially, that's all you're thinking about.
That's right.
And then you add the double whammy of your art having to be sellable. You have to make it sell.
Right.
I think you can get so far away from your values creatively and your impulses creatively that you're kind of dead in the water before you start. So I coach a lot of people to get clear about what their baseline income is, like any business person, right? The base, how much do you need to make?
Yeah, I love that.
Right. And so how, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no. So now we've decided, okay, I know that I need to make X number of dollars to quit my job. What's the next thing? How do I go, okay, how do I identify who will pay for this? Is it saleable? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, again, it will really come down to the art, what it is. Now, initially, for instance, with actors, I don't coach a lot of actors, but and there's another coach who's more qualified, named Brian O'Neill, and he wrote a very good book called Acting as a Business. But for instance, if you're an actor and you want to get out of the day job thing, well, I think the shortest point between that and getting to be financially somewhat independent is commercials. You would really lean hard into getting commercial work.
So if you want to write a book, would you go out and try to get published in Forbes and like blog?
If you were writing, well, first of all, if you were to write a book, we presume that you have finished it, that you have written it, I think, right? And then, I think a writer may need to look at other ways to leverage their writing to make a living. There might be a lot of steps between making a living as a novelist, right? And getting out of a day job. First, make a living as a writer. We might focus on that, right? A copywriter, and doing an editor, a journalist, but that means starting your own business in a sense, working on that. Concurrently, because we're not all working all day long, I think there's nothing wrong with putting together a strategy for getting published. So that may involve researching publishing companies online and finding out how to write a book proposal. I'm a big proponent of Barbara Scher's work. I don't know if you know the book Wishcraft.
Oh, good name.
She is to me, she's the mother of coaching. And she had ADHD. And she's a proponent of reverse engineering. And she has a lovely flow chart in the book where you start with the goal, like getting my novel published. And then you work backwards. What has to happen right before that? Right?
Yeah,
the final draft has to be approved by the editor. What has to happen right before that? And continuing to break that down until you get to what you could do today. And
that's like the mic drop moment here, right? Which is start with your goal and back it out so that you, and in my, I would say put dates around it as best as you can.
Oh, yes.
Right. Smart goals, right? When will this be due? And what's the consequence if it's not due, right? So I love that. I think that backwards timeline is genius for, this is when I want to quit my job. I want to work.
It also keeps people, I think, connected to their why. Because it's so easy, especially if you're someone with ADD for whom working memory is an issue. And what that means is you can't quite remember how you did something. It always feels like you're reinventing the wheel. That can, all there is the now. If you're doing some boring little research task, it could be easy to lose heart. Whereas if you have this flow chart, all you have to do is look at it and see where along the way you are and how it connects to getting the book published. visual prompts like that, anything to keep your why in front of you. For people, for creative people, for neurodivergent people, having that ignition, inspired ignition. You have to inspire yourself, to ignite yourself to take action. And I love that. Breaking down something visually gives a person that.
That's great. One of the specialties you have, where I want to kind of wrap this up in, is really helping those with ADHD focus on being an entrepreneur. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Right. Well, for one thing, I find this is true with all my clients. Many times my ADHD clients are polymaths, meaning they're very good at everything. And just because you're very good at everything doesn't mean you should be doing everything. As soon as possible, in order to stay consistent, especially if you have ADHD, where what you want is not always aligned with what you feel, it's important to create a support system. And that includes fellow entrepreneurs, and it also includes team. If you have somebody, even just a virtual assistant, 3 hours a week, making sure that you are posting on social media consistently. Consistency is what gets you seen. Don't try to do it alone. That is where, in working with entrepreneurs, I really campaign. It is a campaign to get people to believe in themselves enough to invest that money to hire a team.
I love that. And you talk about 3 keys.
Yes.
Clarity, focus, and action.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that all pull in to what you do? And then how do we, if there are people that are like, oh, I really want to have a conversation with Rahti, or how would they get in touch with you? So if we can end this with kind of bringing it together with those 3 keys and next steps.
Right, the 3 keys. I wrote that a long time ago.
I did my research. Clarity, focus, and action.
Thank you for reminding me what I said. Oh, that's embarrassing. Anyway, clarity, focus, and action. Well, clarity is knowing what you want. That's the big question. What do you want? Not what you think you should want. What do you want? And then once you really are honest with yourself about that, you can focus on the shortest path to getting it. That simplifies life considerably. And you identify actions that will have the most impact. For instance, the shortest distances, I've heard a coach say, between your bank account and your market is a conversation.
Yeah,
that can be the most frightening thing, to ask for conversations for to get work, right? So if you're clear that you know what the work it is you want to do, and you know what problem you solve for people, then you take those high impact actions. You don't sticker around on your website. People build businesses without a website these days, even.
Yeah, I love that. I have a client that just launched without a website, but owns the domain and is redirecting it to his LinkedIn profile. That's
brilliant. That is so efficient.
Yeah,
I love efficiency. And you know what? You don't come about efficiency alone either, right? Because
that's true.
Sometimes ideas can only come through conversation. So get out of isolation. That's number one. And people can go to my website, creativecallingcoaching.com, and you can schedule a conversation with me through there. And that's what they can do.
This was a lot of fun. I think there are so many people in a sales role that are probably listening today that have a different passion, that really want to follow something else. And I think that the things that you talked about today are going to get some people really excited to start pursuing that. So,
well, I hope so. And I am so delighted you had me. I had such fun. It flew by in 10 minutes. It
did. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we do keep them around 20 minutes and we're just about that 20-minute mark. And I appreciate your time. And I'm sure that the listeners got great value. And as we close this out to everyone that is listening right now, when you're out and about in the world, don't forget to make your sales social.
Thanks for watching, and join us again for more special guest instructors bringing you marketing, sales training, and social selling strategies that will set you apart. Hit the subscribe button below to get the latest episodes from the Making Sales Social podcast. Give this video a thumbs up and comment down below on what you want to hear from us next. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play. Visit our website, socialsaleslink.com, for more information.